Alarms tore through the underground command center as red lights flashed across every screen. General Victor Hale dropped his coffee cup and ran toward the main terminal, his heart pounding. On the largest screen, a shape unlike anything human eyes had ever seen was forming at the edge of the solar system. It was not a meteor, it was not a satellite, it was a fleet, and it was massive. "Confirm what I'm seeing," Hale said, his voice tight. Lisa Monroe, the young communications officer, stared at her screen in disbelief. "Sir, we're picking up over 400 large vessels. They just appeared out of nowhere, right past Neptune's orbit." "That's not possible," someone whispered from the back of the room. But it was happening. Far beyond Earth, near the edge of the solar system, hundreds of massive ships shimmered into existence, tearing space open behind them, as if reality itself had been ripped apart. They moved with a chilling calm, gliding forward, like predators who already knew they had won. Inside the largest of these ships, a floating city of metal and light, Emperor Draxus Vel stood at the center of his command deck. He wore a long, dark cloak lined with the emblem of the Zarathian Empire, a symbol feared across countless star systems. His eyes, sharp and calculating, studied the small blue planet displayed before him. "Another primitive world," he said, his voice cold and amused. "Radio signals, unshielded cities, weak defenses. This will not take long." Admiral Kryn Tolvax, his second in command, stepped beside him. "Scouts confirm it, my lord. No planetary shielding detected. Weapons technology is at least 1,000 years behind our standard. They call this world Earth." Draxus allowed himself a small, confident smile. "Earth. How quaint. Prepare the fleet. We will make this quick." Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. Within minutes, every television channel, every radio station, and every phone screen carried the same message. An unknown fleet had entered the solar system, and it was heading straight for Earth. In New York City, cars stopped in the middle of the street as people stared up at the sky, though nothing was visible yet. In London, a woman named Grace Whitmore pulled her children close to her, unable to explain what she saw on the news. In small towns and big cities across the world, people held their breath. Inside the Global Defense Command Center in Colorado, General Hale addressed his team. "I want eyes on that fleet every second. I want to know their speed, their formation, everything. And someone get me the president on the line, now." Ethan Cole, a young systems analyst barely 25 years old, rushed to his console. He had trained for emergencies, but nothing like this. His job was to monitor Earth's satellite network, and right now, that network was screaming with warnings. "Sir," Ethan said, "at their current speed, they'll reach Earth's orbit in 6 hours. 6 hours." The words hung heavy in the air. 6 hours to prepare for something no nation had ever faced. Not a war between countries, not a natural disaster. An arrival from beyond the stars, and no one knew what it wanted. Hale turned to his team. "Get every available defense system online. I want satellites repositioned. I want every early warning system active. And I want a direct line open to every major world leader. We are not facing this fleet unprepared." Yet even as he gave the order, a quiet fear gripped him. Nothing in Earth's arsenal, not missiles, not fighter jets, not even nuclear weapons, had ever been tested against something like this. The fleet above them moved with a kind of confidence that suggested they had done this many times before, on many other worlds. In a quiet, heavily guarded facility beneath the mountains of Nevada, far from the panic spreading across the surface, a very different kind of preparation was already underway. This was Site 7, a research facility so secret that even most branches of the military did not know it existed. Dr. Elena Marsh stood in front of a massive glass chamber, watching a soft blue light pulse steadily inside it. She had spent the last 15 years of her life here, working alongside a small team of scientists on a project that had started almost by accident. "They're really coming," said her colleague, a quiet man named Tobias Reyes, as he read the emergency alert on his tablet. "After all these years of testing, we might actually need this." Elena did not look away from the chamber. "Then it's a good thing we never stopped." The blue light inside the chamber pulsed again, steady and calm, completely unaware of the storm gathering above the planet. This device, small enough to be transported in a single truck, was the result of a discovery that could change everything, though only a handful of people on Earth knew it existed. As night fell over half the world, and the fleet drew closer with every passing minute, humanity braced itself. Soldiers were placed on high alert. Emergency broadcasts urged citizens to remain calm and stay indoors. Fighter jets were fueled and ready, even though everyone quietly understood they would likely be useless against whatever was coming. At Global Defense Command, General Hale watched the countdown clock on the wall. 5 hours and 40 minutes remained. "Sir," Lisa Monroe called out, "we're receiving something. A transmission, coming from the fleet." The entire room fell silent. "Play it," Hale said. Static crackled through the speakers, followed by a deep, mechanical voice that echoed through the command center. The words were translated instantly by systems no one recognized. Systems far more advanced than anything Earth possessed. "People of Earth, this is Emperor Draxus Vel, of the Zorathian Empire. Your world has been selected for integration. Resistance will only prolong your suffering. Prepare to submit." The message ended, as abruptly as it began, leaving the room in stunned silence. Hale clenched his jaw. "Integration," he repeated quietly. "They're not asking, they're telling us." Across the world, world leaders gathered in secure locations, watching the same message play on their screens. Panic simmered beneath careful, practiced calm. Some called for immediate surrender, hoping to spare lives. Others called for resistance, refusing to bow before even understanding what they were facing. But deep beneath the mountains of Nevada, Dr. Elena Marsh felt something different. Not fear, but determination. "They think we're primitive," she said to her team. "They think this will be easy." Tobias looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Are you sure it's ready? We've never tested it at full scale, not against something like this." Elena finally turned away from the glowing chamber and looked at him directly. "It's ready. It has to be." As the fleet continued its slow, terrifying approach toward Earth, two very different stories were unfolding at once. One, playing out in the skies and on the screens of billions of frightened people, told of an unstoppable alien force arriving to conquer a defenseless world. The other, hidden deep underground, spoke of a secret that could turn everything the Empire believed about Earth completely upside down. Neither side yet understood how close they were to a battle that would be remembered for centuries, not because of its size, but because of what would happen in the very first moments of true conflict. The clock kept counting down. 4 hours, 3 hours, 2. And high above the blue and green planet, the Zorathian fleet moved closer, confident, unstoppable, and utterly unaware of what waited for them below. 2 hours before the fleet reached Earth's orbit, Admiral Kryn Tolvac stood before a curved display, showing detailed scans of the planet below. He had conquered dozens of worlds under Draxus Vel's command, and every single one had followed the same pattern. Fear first, then chaos, then surrender. "Their weapons are laughably weak," Kryn said, studying the data. "Chemical explosives, basic metal aircraft, and a handful of unstable nuclear devices. Nothing capable of piercing our hull plating." Draxus stood beside him, arms folded behind his back, watching Earth grow larger on the screen with each passing minute. "And their defenses?" "None to speak of," Kryn replied. "No planetary shielding. No orbital weapons platforms. This will be one of the fastest conquests in the history of the Empire." A junior officer approached cautiously, bowing his head before speaking. "My lord, we intercepted a transmission from their planet. Their leaders are discussing surrender terms." Draxus laughed, a low sound that carried through the command deck. "Of course they are. They understand their place already." He turned to Kryn. "Prepare a full show of force. I want their first sight of true power to be unforgettable. Let them see exactly what they are dealing with before we descend." Far below, on Earth, the situation had grown far more tense. In secure government buildings across the globe, leaders debated in hushed, urgent voices. Some believed cooperation was the only path to survival. Others refused to accept defeat before a single shot had been fired. General Hale stood before a video call, connecting him to military leaders from a dozen countries. His face was calm, but his eyes betrayed the exhaustion of a man who had not slept in over 20 hours. "We cannot surrender blindly," Hale said firmly. "We don't know their true intentions, and we don't know their limits. If we roll over now, we may never get another chance to defend ourselves." A general from across the ocean, a stern woman named Colonel Priya Anand, nodded in agreement. Every world they have already claimed likely thought the same thing we are thinking now. That resistance was pointless. We don't know that for certain. We owe it to every person on this planet to at least try. The debate continued, but time was running out. The fleet would arrive within the hour, and no amount of discussion could change what was coming. Deep beneath the Nevada mountains, Site 7 had transformed into a hive of quiet, focused activity. Dr. Elena Marsh moved briskly between workstations, checking readings, reviewing calculations, and speaking in low, steady tones with her team. "Power levels are stable," said a technician named Priya Ose, watching a bank of monitors. "The field generator is holding at 98% capacity." "Good," Elena said. "Keep it there. We may only get one real chance to prove this works." Tobias Reyes approached her, his face lined with worry. "Elena, I need to ask you something honestly. If this doesn't work, if the field fails during a real engagement, what happens?" Elena paused, choosing her words carefully. "Then we find another way. But it will work. We've run the calculations 1,000 times." What Elena and her team had discovered 15 years earlier had begun as a simple accident. During an experiment meant to stabilize a new form of clean energy, their equipment had unexpectedly created a strange ripple in the fabric of space itself, a temporary field where the normal rules of physics seemed to bend. At first, they assumed it was a malfunction, but further testing revealed something extraordinary. Within this field, any concentrated form of energy, whether heat, light, or force, would collapse inward on itself instead of spreading outward. In simple terms, weapons that relied on projecting destructive energy outward would fail completely within the field's range. Explosions would fold inward. Beams of light or plasma would curl back on themselves. It was as if the field refused to allow destructive energy to travel where it was aimed. For years, the discovery remained a scientific curiosity, tested only in small, controlled environments. But as global tensions with unknown origins began appearing, quiet signals detected from deep space that suggested Earth was not alone, the project had been expanded under strict secrecy. Funding poured in from governments around the world, though very few officials understood exactly what they were funding. Now, after 15 years of careful, quiet work, humanity's secret was about to be tested against the very threat it had been built to counter. At Global Defense Command, General Hale received an encrypted message that made him pause. He read it twice before looking up at his team. "I need this room cleared except for essential personnel," he said quietly. Once the room emptied, Hale opened a secure channel. On the screen appeared a woman he had only spoken with a handful of times in the past decade, always through secure lines, always briefly. "Dr. Marsh," Hale said, "I take it you've seen the news." Elena's face appeared calm, though her eyes carried the same tension gripping the entire planet. "I have. Is it as bad as it looks?" "Worse," Hale admitted. "They'll be in orbit within the hour. I need to know if Site 7 is ready." Elena glanced back at the glowing chamber behind her, then returned her focus to the screen. "We're ready. But General, I need you to understand something. This technology has never been tested against a threat like this. We believe it will work, but there are no guarantees." Hale exhaled slowly. "Doctor, right now, a guarantee is more than anyone else on this planet can offer me. Prepare your team. I'll make sure you have what you need." As the conversation ended, tension rippled through both locations, one preparing for a battle in the skies, the other preparing for a battle hidden beneath the surface, unknown to nearly everyone on Earth, including most of its own defenders. High above, the Zorathian fleet entered Earth's outer orbit, casting massive shadows as sunlight reflected off their dark, metallic hulls. Citizens across the globe stepped outside, looking up in disbelief as the ships became visible even to the naked eye, distant points of light moving with deliberate, unnatural precision. Inside the command ship, Draxus Vel watched the planet fill the main view screen. Blue oceans, green continents, scattered clouds drifting peacefully below, utterly unaware of how quickly everything was about to change. "Position the fleet for a full demonstration," Draxus ordered. "Target their largest population centers. We will not destroy them, not yet, but we will show them exactly what awaits those who resist." Kryn Tolvax relayed the command, and throughout the fleet, weapon systems began to hum with growing energy. Massive plasma cannons, capable of leveling entire city blocks in seconds, rotated slowly, locking onto coordinates far below. On Earth, emergency sirens began to wail in major cities across multiple continents. People rushed into shelters, though many understood, deep down, that no shelter could protect them from what was approaching. In Colorado, General Hale watched the tactical display as hundreds of red markers appeared, representing the fleet's weapons locking onto targets across the globe. "Dr. Marsh," he said into his radio, his voice steady, despite the chaos surrounding him. "It's time." Beneath the Nevada mountains, Elena Marsh took a deep breath and turned to her team. "Activate the primary field generator. Let's show them what Earth is really capable of." The chamber's soft blue light began to pulse faster, brighter, spreading outward through hidden channels buried deep beneath the surface. Channels that stretched for miles in every direction, part of a network few people even knew existed. Above, the Zarathian fleet prepared to fire its first shots, fully confident that Earth's fall would be swift, painless, and utterly without resistance. They had no idea how wrong they were about to be. The first plasma cannons fired without warning. Streaks of blinding orange light tore down through the atmosphere, aimed directly at the heart of major cities. In Colorado, General Hale watched the tactical display as the projected impact points blinked red, marking targets that included his own command center. "Brace for impact," he called out, though there was little anyone could physically do to prepare for what was coming. Millions of people around the world watched the sky in horror as the streaks of light grew closer, faster than anything they had ever seen. Parents pulled children close, strangers reached for one another's hands. In that moment, the entire planet held its breath together. Then, something impossible happened. As the plasma bolts entered the upper atmosphere, they began to slow. Not gradually, but suddenly. As if they had struck an invisible wall, the brilliant orange light twisted, curling in on itself like smoke caught in a whirlwind. Within seconds, each bolt collapsed into a small, harmless flash of light, before fading away completely, dissolving into nothing before it could reach the ground. Silence fell over the command center as everyone stared at the screens in stunned disbelief. "Report," Hale said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What just happened?" Ethan Cole, still glued to his console, shook his head in amazement. "Sir, the attacks. They just disappeared. Every single one. Impact 0 across all target locations." Far above, aboard the Zarathian command ship, the reaction was equally stunned, though far less relieved. "Report," Draxus Vel demanded, his earlier confidence replaced by confusion. An officer at a nearby station struggled to process the readings. "My lord, our weapons discharged normally, but something intercepted them before impact. All energy dissipated completely. We recorded 0 casualties, 0 structural damage." Kryn Tolvax stepped forward, studying the data himself, his expression hardening. "That's not possible. No shielding technology in this sector of the galaxy can neutralize plasma discharge that quickly." Draxus's eyes narrowed as he stared down at the seemingly peaceful planet below. "Then this world is hiding something. Increase power output. Target their capital cities directly. I want a response that cannot be denied." Beneath the Nevada mountains, the atmosphere inside Site 7 was electric, with disbelief and quiet triumph. Elena Marsh watched the readings scroll across her screen, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization that everything they had worked toward had actually succeeded. "The field held," Tobias said, his voice filled with something between shock and joy. "Elena, it actually held." "Don't celebrate yet," Elena replied, though a small smile crossed her face. "They're going to hit us harder. Keep every system monitored. We need to know exactly how much this field can withstand." As if on cue, the tactical display lit up again, this time with a far larger wave of incoming attacks. The Zarathian fleet had increased their weapons output significantly, launching a coordinated assault meant to overwhelm whatever unknown defense had stopped their first strike. Across the globe, the second wave of attacks began, dozens of plasma bolts streaking down toward multiple continents simultaneously. This time, the attacks were joined by something new, concentrated energy beams designed to burn through solid rock and steel. Once again, as the weapons entered the atmosphere, they slowed and twisted unnaturally, folding inward until they vanished into harmless bursts of light. Not a single structure was damaged. Not a single life was lost. In cities around the world, people who had been huddled in fear began stepping outside cautiously, looking up at the sky in confusion and growing hope. News anchors, initially reporting on what they believed would be humanity's darkest hour, struggled to explain what they were witnessing instead. "It appears," said one visibly shaken news anchor in London, "that whatever defense our planet possesses, it is working. I repeat, there are no reports of damage anywhere in the world." Aboard the Zarathian flagship, frustration was quickly turning into something far more dangerous: wounded pride. "Impossible," Draxus muttered, staring at the failed attack reports. This world was supposed to be defenseless. Kryn approached cautiously, choosing his next words with care. "My lord, perhaps we should reconsider our approach. If they possess technology capable of neutralizing our weapons entirely, direct assault may not be the wisest strategy." Draxus turned sharply, his composure cracking for the first time. "I have conquered thousands of worlds, Admiral. I will not be humiliated by a species that has not even left their own solar system. Prepare a full fleet assault. Every ship, every weapon, aim directly at their strongest defended location. We will overwhelm whatever they are hiding." Kryn hesitated, but ultimately relayed the order. Throughout the fleet, hundreds of ships began repositioning, forming a tight, coordinated formation designed for maximum firepower, a tactic that had never failed the Empire in all its centuries of conquest. Back on Earth, General Hale received updated readings from Site 7, his expression a careful mix of relief and concern. "Dr. Marsh," he said over the secure line, "the field is holding, but they're not backing down. Our scans show they're regrouping for something bigger." "Much bigger." Elena's eyes remained fixed on her monitors, watching the fleet's movements with intense focus. "Let them come. The field's range increases the longer it stays active. If they group together for a large-scale attack, they'll be playing right into our hands." "You're certain?" Hale asked. "No," Elena admitted honestly, "but it's our best chance." As the Zarathian fleet completed its formation, hundreds of ships aligning into a massive wall of firepower, tension across Earth reached its peak. This was no longer a probing attack meant to demonstrate power. This was preparation for something far more devastating. Inside Site 7, Tobias monitored the field generator's core readings, nervously watching numbers climb steadily higher. "Elena, if they fire everything at once, the field will need to expand rapidly to cover that scale of attack. I'm not sure our systems were designed for something this large." Elena did not look away from her screen. "Then we adjust in real time. We built this system to learn, to adapt." It's about to prove whether that was enough. Above the planet, Draxus Vel gave the final order, his voice cold and absolute. "Fire everything. Leave nothing standing." In an instant, the entire Zarathian fleet unleashed its full arsenal simultaneously. Hundreds of plasma cannons, energy beams, and experimental weapons fired at once, creating a wall of destructive light so massive it briefly turned the night sky as bright as day across half the planet. For a terrifying moment, even Elena Marsh felt her breath catch as she watched the field generator's readings spike dangerously high. "Come on," she whispered under her breath. "Hold." The massive wave of energy slammed into the invisible field surrounding Earth, and for the first time, the field visibly shimmered, a faint golden outline briefly becoming visible around the planet's atmosphere, as if the sky itself had been outlined in light. Then, just as it had before, the attack began to fold inward, but this time, something unexpected happened. Instead of simply dissolving into harmless light, the sheer scale of collapsing energy created a chain reaction, a powerful ripple that spread outward from Earth's atmosphere and raced back toward its source. Aboard the Zarathian ships, Alarms blared as the returning energy wave struck the fleet itself. Shields that had never failed in centuries of conquest flickered and collapsed under the unexpected feedback. Entire sections of multiple ships lost power instantly, engines sputtering and failing as the mysterious energy surged through their systems. "Report!" Draxus shouted, gripping the edge of his command console as the ship shuddered beneath him. "My lord!" an officer called out in disbelief. "We're losing power across the fleet. Multiple vessels reporting complete systems failure. It's as if our own attack has been turned against us." Kryn Tolvac stared at the view screen, watching helplessly as several of the Empire's most powerful warships drifted lifelessly in space, their lights extinguished, their weapons silent. For the first time in his long, victorious career, Admiral Kryn Tolvac felt something he had never experienced before: genuine uncertainty. Below, in the depths of Site 7, cheers erupted as the readings confirmed what had just happened. "The reflection worked," Tobias shouted, disbelief and excitement mixing in his voice. "Elena, the field didn't just stop the attack, it sent it right back at them." Elena allowed herself a brief moment of relief before refocusing on the screens. "This isn't over. They're wounded, not defeated. We need to be ready for whatever they do next." High above, aboard a crippled Zarathian flagship, Draxus Vel stared down at the small blue planet, with a mixture of fury and, for the first time in centuries, fear. "This world," he said slowly, "is not what we were told." Kryn nodded grimly. "No, my lord, it is not." The battle for Earth had only just begun, but already, everything the Empire believed about the galaxy's supposed weakest species had been shattered in a matter of seconds. Smoke and sparks drifted through the corridors of the Zarathian flagship as emergency lights flickered on, casting a dim red glow across the command deck. Draxus Vel stood in silence, watching damage reports scroll endlessly across his console. Ships that had once formed the backbone of his invincible fleet now floated dark and lifeless against the stars. "Casualty report," he said quietly. Kryn Tolvac hesitated before answering. "We've lost communication with over 60 vessels, my lord. Preliminary scans suggest complete systems failure across the fleet's outer formation. This has never happened before, not in the history of the Empire." Draxus turned to face him, his expression unreadable. "Then it is happening now." Across the fleet, panic began to spread among the crew, a feeling few of them had ever experienced. For centuries, the Zarathian Empire had conquered world after world with barely any resistance. Now, a planet they had dismissed as primitive had crippled a significant portion of their forces in a matter of seconds. Back on Earth, celebrations were cautious but undeniable. In cities across the globe, people who had prepared for the worst instead watched news reports confirming that the alien attack had failed completely. Children who had been rushed into shelters were carried back outside by relieved parents. Strangers embraced one another in the streets, overwhelmed by a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. At Global Defense Command, General Hale allowed himself a brief, quiet moment of relief before turning his attention back to the tactical display. "Dr. Marsh, incredible work. But I need to know, can they still hurt us?" Elena Marsh studied the readings carefully, her scientific mind refusing to let excitement cloud her judgment.
"The field absorbed and reflected their primary assault, but we don't know their full capabilities."
This could simply be their opening move. Her words proved prophetic. Aboard the Zarathian flagship, Draxus Vel had reached a boiling point. Humiliation was something he had never learned to accept, and the idea of retreating from a supposedly primitive world was unthinkable. "Prepare planetary bombardment protocol," he ordered, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "If conventional weapons cannot break their defenses, we will strike with something they cannot possibly withstand." "Dad." Kryn's eyes widened slightly. "My lord, the planetary bombardment protocol has not been used in over 2 centuries. Its destructive power is—" "I am aware of its power," Draxus interrupted sharply. "Prepare it. Now." Deep within the flagship, hidden behind multiple layers of security, an ancient and rarely used weapon system began to power on. Unlike conventional plasma cannons, this weapon did not rely on projecting energy outward in a single burst. Instead, it gathered destructive force from multiple points across the fleet simultaneously, channeling it into a single, devastating strike capable of cracking a planet's crust. Back on Earth, sensors at Site 7 detected the unusual energy signature immediately. "Elena," Tobias called out urgently. "We're reading a massive energy buildup across their entire fleet. This isn't like their previous attacks. The pattern is completely different." Elena's stomach tightened as she studied the data streaming across her screen. They're gathering power from multiple sources into a single point. This isn't a scattered assault anymore. They're preparing something concentrated, something far more dangerous. General Hale's voice crackled through the comm system, tense and urgent. "Doctor, can your field stop something like that?" Elena hesitated, running calculations in her mind, faster than the computers could display them. "Our field works by causing concentrated energy to collapse inward on itself. In theory, the more concentrated their attack becomes, the more effective our field should be against it. But theory and reality are not always the same thing." "What do you need from us?" Hale asked. "Time," Elena replied, "and full power to every generator connected to the network. If this is truly their strongest weapon, we need everything we have ready to meet it." Across the globe, secondary field generators, smaller versions of the primary system beneath Nevada, hidden in secure locations on every continent, began powering up simultaneously. This global network, built quietly over the years under multiple layers of secrecy, represented humanity's true, unseen line of defense. Aboard the Zarathian flagship, the bombardment weapon reached full charge. Draxus Vel watched with grim determination as the targeting system locked onto Earth's largest population center. "Fire," he commanded. A blinding beam of concentrated energy, far more powerful than anything the fleet had unleashed before, tore through space toward the planet below. Unlike the earlier scattered attacks, this single, focused strike carried enough destructive force to devastate an entire region in an instant. At Site 7, alarms blared as the massive energy signature approached Earth's atmosphere. "Brace the network," Elena shouted. "Redirect all available power to the primary field." The soft blue glow of the field generator surged brighter than ever before, spreading rapidly across the planet's atmosphere, in a shimmering wave of golden light, visible even from the ground in daylight. As the concentrated beam struck the field, the entire structure shuddered violently. Unlike the previous attacks, which had dissolved almost instantly, this single, focused strike pressed against the barrier with tremendous force, testing its very limits. Inside Site 7, warning lights flashed across every console as power levels spiked dangerously. "We're at 95% capacity," Tobias called out, sweat forming on his brow. "If this holds much longer, we risk overloading the entire network." Elena's eyes remained locked on the readings, her mind racing through countless calculations. "Redirect auxiliary power from Sites 3 and 9. We need every available resource funneled into this." Across the world, in hidden facilities from South America to Australia, engineers and scientists who had spent years preparing for a moment they hoped would never come, worked frantically to reroute power, pushing every system to its absolute limit. Slowly, painstakingly, the field began to stabilize. The concentrated beam, unable to break through the barrier, began folding inward, exactly as the smaller attacks had before, though this time, the process took several agonizing seconds rather than an instant. Finally, with a brilliant flash of light visible from space, the beam collapsed entirely, its immense energy dispersing harmlessly into the atmosphere. Aboard the Zarathian flagship, the reaction was immediate and severe. The same principle that had disabled portions of the fleet earlier activated again, this time on a much larger scale. The sheer power of the reflected energy surged backward through the weapons systems, overwhelming safety measures and causing catastrophic failures throughout the ship. Explosions rippled across multiple decks as emergency systems struggled to contain the damage. Draxus Vel was thrown from his position as the entire flagship shook violently. "Status report," he demanded, pulling himself upright amid the chaos. Kryn, badly shaken but uninjured, checked the readings with trembling hands. "My lord, we've lost primary power. Backup systems are failing across multiple sections. This isn't just a defense they've built. It's a weapon that turns our own strength against us." Draxus stared at the view screen in stunned silence as the once mighty fleet, An armada that had conquered thousands of worlds without significant resistance, now drifted in disarray above a planet they had arrogantly dismissed as insignificant. Below, at Site 7, exhausted cheers erupted once again, though this time, the celebration was tempered by careful awareness of how close they had come to failure. "We held," Tobias said, collapsing back into his chair, utterly drained. "Elena, we actually held." Elena allowed herself a brief nod, though her focus remained sharp. "For now, we need to know what they'll do next. An empire like this won't simply walk away after 2 failed attempts." At Global Defense Command, General Hale watched as reports confirmed the second wave had failed to cause any damage on Earth's surface. Yet his sense of relief was cautious at best. "Dr. Marsh," he said over the comm, "incredible work, truly. But what happens if they decide to retreat and return with a larger force?" Elena considered the question carefully. "Then we'll be ready. But something tells me this battle isn't over yet. Not for them, and not for their pride." High above, aboard his crippled flagship, Draxus Vel stood in silence, staring down at the small, defiant planet below. Centuries of unbroken conquest had led him to this moment, a moment of humiliation he had never imagined possible. "Prepare a full retreat," Kryn suggested carefully, fully aware of how dangerous such a suggestion might be. "We need to regroup, understand what we're truly facing." Draxus remained silent for a long moment, his pride warring with logic. Finally, through gritted teeth, he gave the order. "Retreat the fleet," he said, "but mark this world. We will return, and next time, we will be prepared." As the surviving Zorathian ships began a slow, careful withdrawal, humanity watched in stunned disbelief as the massive fleet that had threatened to conquer their world began retreating into the depths of space, leaving behind wreckage and unanswered questions. Earth had survived its first true contact with an interstellar threat, but deep within Site 7, Elena Marsh understood something the rest of the world had not yet realized. This was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. 3 days after the retreat of the Zorathian fleet, the world remained in a state of cautious celebration, mixed with lingering uncertainty. News channels replayed footage of the failed invasion endlessly, though very few outlets understood the true science behind what had saved the planet. Most people simply believed that unknown, powerful defenses had protected Earth, and for now, that explanation was enough to bring relief to billions of frightened people. Inside Site 7, however, the mood remained focused and serious. Elena Marsh stood before a wall of monitors, reviewing data collected during the battle alongside General Hale, who had traveled personally to the facility for the first time. "The numbers are extraordinary," Hale said, studying the readouts. "You didn't just defend the planet, Doctor. You disabled a significant portion of one of the most powerful fleets we've ever detected." Elena nodded, though her expression remained cautious. "We got lucky that their attack pattern matched our field's strengths. If they adapt their tactics next time, we may not be as fortunate." "Do you believe they'll return?" Hale asked. Elena considered the question carefully. An empire that has conquered thousands of worlds doesn't simply accept defeat from a single failed attempt. "I believe this was only their first move." Far beyond Earth's solar system, deep within Zorathian territory, Draxus Vel stood before a council of empire leaders, each one demanding answers for the humiliating defeat suffered at the hands of a world they had considered utterly insignificant. "Explain to us," said one council member, an elder with a stern, weathered face, "how a primitive species managed to cripple one of our strongest fleets." Draxus, still carrying the weight of his failure, chose his words carefully. "Their technology is unlike anything we have encountered. It does not destroy our weapons directly. It reflects them back upon us, turning our own strength into our weakness." Murmurs spread through the council chamber, a mixture of disbelief and concern. "What do you propose?" the elder asked. "A larger force," Draxus said firmly. "One equipped with countermeasures designed specifically to bypass their defense. We underestimated this world once. We will not make that mistake again." The council deliberated for hours, weighing the risks of continued conflict against the embarrassment of retreat. Eventually, they granted Draxus a second opportunity, though with strict conditions and diminished resources, a clear signal that his failure had not gone unnoticed. Back on Earth, life slowly began returning to a strange new normal. Though the immediate threat had passed, world leaders understood that Earth could no longer operate under the illusion of isolation from the wider galaxy. Secret meetings were held among the most powerful nations. Discussions focused not on politics or borders, but on survival and unity, in the face of a threat far greater than any conflict humanity had faced before. At Global Defense Command, General Hale addressed a newly formed international council. Representatives from nearly every major nation gathered together for the first time under a single, unified purpose. What we witnessed, Hale said, was not the end of a threat. It was a warning. We have proof now that we are not alone in this universe, and not everyone out there wishes us well. Our survival depends on how we prepare from this moment forward. The Council listened intently as Hale outlined a new global initiative, one focused on expanding Earth's defensive capabilities, strengthening international cooperation, and preparing for the possibility of future contact, whether hostile or otherwise. Meanwhile, deep within Site-7, Elena Marsh and her team worked tirelessly, refining the field technology that had saved the planet. Though their initial success had been remarkable, Elena understood that complacency could prove fatal. "We need to anticipate every possible adaptation they might use," she told her team during a late-night planning session. "If they return with countermeasures designed to bypass our reflection field, we need alternative defenses ready." Tobias, exhausted but determined, nodded in agreement. "We've already begun testing variations of the field, adjustments that could allow it to adapt more quickly to different types of energy signatures." As weeks passed, Earth transformed quietly, but significantly. Beneath the surface of everyday life, an unprecedented global effort took shape. Scientists, engineers, and military leaders from nations that had once been rivals now worked side by side, united by a threat that made old conflicts seem insignificant in comparison. Far beyond the solar system, within the heart of Zerathian territory, Draxus Vel oversaw the construction of a new, more calculated invasion force. This time, there would be no arrogance, no assumption of an easy victory. Every ship, every weapon, and every strategy would be carefully designed to counter the mysterious defense that had humiliated the Empire. Admiral Kryn Tolvax, now deeply cautious after witnessing Earth's unexpected resistance, approached Draxus privately as preparations continued. "My lord," Kryn said carefully, "may I speak candidly?" Draxus nodded, gesturing for him to continue. "Perhaps," Kryn suggested, "conquest is not our only option. If this world possesses technology capable of turning our own weapons against us, perhaps understanding them, even negotiating with them, could prove more valuable than continued conflict." Draxus considered the suggestion for a long moment, the sting of his earlier defeat still fresh in his mind. "The Empire does not negotiate with lesser worlds, Admiral. But perhaps, this time, conquest will require more than brute strength alone." Back on Earth, as months passed without further contact from the Zerathian Empire, a strange sense of calm settled over the planet. Though beneath that calm, preparations continued relentlessly. Earth's leaders understood that peace, if it existed at all, was likely only temporary. Elena Marsh stood once again before the glowing chamber that had first sparked humanity's unexpected defense against an interstellar threat. The soft blue light pulsed steadily, now joined by dozens of similar chambers, positioned strategically around the globe, forming a network far stronger than the single system that had saved Earth during its first true test. "We've come a long way," Tobias said, standing beside her, watching the chamber's steady glow. Elena nodded, her expression thoughtful. "And we still have further to go. If they return, we need to be ready for anything, not just a repeat of what worked before." General Hale entered the room, having grown accustomed to visiting Site-7 regularly since the invasion. "Dr. Marsh," he said, "the International Council has approved full funding for the Global Defense Network. Every major nation is contributing resources now." Elena allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. "It's a start." As Earth continued strengthening its defenses, whispers of humanity's unexpected resistance had already begun spreading far beyond the immediate borders of the Zerathian Empire. Other civilizations across the galaxy, some allies of the Empire, others quiet rivals watching from a distance, took notice of a small, previously unknown world that had accomplished something few believed possible. In the vast emptiness of space, a new kind of tension began to form, not the tension of an impending invasion, but the tension of an entire galaxy, suddenly aware that a new, unpredictable force had entered the greater balance of power. Back on Earth, standing beneath the mountains of Nevada, Elena Marsh looked out over the quiet hum of machinery that had once been humanity's best-kept secret, a secret that had ultimately saved the planet from what could have been total conquest. "We're not just defending Earth anymore," she said quietly to herself. "We're stepping into something much bigger." Far above, in the endless darkness of space, countless eyes across the galaxy, some curious, some cautious, and some deeply concerned, turned their attention toward a small, blue planet that had dared to stand against an empire and had emerged not just unbroken, but stronger than ever before. The empire had underestimated Earth once. It was a mistake they would not make again. But neither would humanity ever again believe itself alone in the universe, or unprepared for whatever might come next. The battle for Earth's future had only just begun.